Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
My name is Denise Butler. I am the Associate Director for ACER, which is African Career Education and Resource Inc. I'm also the Director of Economic and Community Development, and my department that I lead is hosting these series. We did one in February in Brooklyn Park, talking about cooperatives, the importance of cooperatives and supporting BIPOC cooperatives, and how that is a tool for building Black wealth. So this morning we're gonna be here talking about back the block, right? Having cultural districts, cultural destinations, and being intentional around supporting these cultural districts, BIPOC businesses. But without any further ado, I'm gonna have our newly elected mayor of Brooklyn Center. We are in the city of Brooklyn Center this morning. Mayor April Graves come up here and get us acclimated and welcome into the beautiful city of Brooklyn Center. So, Mayor April Graves. And Mayor April Graves and I go way back to 511 Tedesco in St. Paul when we were about 8, 9 years old. So yeah, we've known each other for a while, off and on. Welcome.
Thank you, Denise. Welcome everybody to Brooklyn Center. Thank you for coming today. Thank you to our panelists as well for helping to share the information. I know that small businesses are the lifeblood of our community. We definitely have a lot of things to offer beyond just, our community center here. It's a cultural place with lots of diversity. And so I'm just really grateful for ACER and other folks that are doing the work of supporting small businesses. I really think that's how we're going to end up with a thriving economy, not the big box stores, but the smaller stores that really serve the needs of our community members. I also want to say that it's been an ongoing effort to provide small business supports. When I first started as a city council member back in 2015, I ran and I talked about the need for something like a global market in Brooklyn Center. And although we haven't necessarily been able to reach that ultimate goal that I had then, I have seen a lot of progress towards supporting small businesses, creating spaces, incubator spaces, and also looking at development in a way that would make it more accessible for small business owners. We also have increased our staff in the economic development department, and the person in particular I wanted to mention to you guys is Wang Tao. He's our economic development coordinator. So he's working with small businesses in the community to try to support them in being able to access financing. So in fact, right now we have 2 programs in Brooklyn Center. One is our micro facade grant program. You can get up to $5,000 grant for an exterior capital improvement. And we'll match that dollar for dollar for up to $5,000. In addition, we also have a revolving loan program that could be used for financing capital improvements, and that's based on loan rates of prime -2. And as of just a couple days ago, that rate is 7.75%. So if you're interested in connecting with Vaughn, you can reach him at, trying to find his email. Well, the general email is community-development@ci-brooklyn-center.mn.us, or his direct number is 763-569-3301. Thank you guys for coming out today, and also I'll leave you with a card if you'd like to have my business card. I'd be happy to talk with you and help you connect with others in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Graves. So as ACER has been working in community doing this work, our organization celebrated 15 years, February 8th. Thank you, and I've been with the organization. This year will make me 11 years of that 15 years.
Wow.
Time sure does fly, doesn't it, Isabel? And a lot of folks know I'm really passionate about the community. I live here, I work here, I play here, and so a lot of this is very, very, like family to me. When the work that we do here, as ACER and as Denise Butler, working and living in this community. I myself is also an entrepreneur, and I just really 2013, when we started doing the light rail work, it just really kind of like shocked me, like how many of our businesses are here but are not visible. and not, intentional around how they are looked at or viewed. And they had kind of like, we talk about naturally occurring affordable housing, they kind of like naturally occurring commercial districts because they understood the power of coming together and the importance of being in one space. And so we have experts who can really speak to more to what I'm trying to say this morning. And so without any further ado, I'm gonna introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Bruce P. Corrie. He is the Associate Vice President for Government and Community Relations and the Professor of Economics at Concordia. He is a leading Twin Cities-based economist, business expert, cultural entrepreneur, and long-term member of the Concordia University St. Paul faculty, with a specific focus on minority businesses and the growing impact minority communities have on the broader economy. Dr. Corrie brings unique perspective and insight relating to the Minnesota business landscape. So without any further ado, Dr. Bruce Corrie.
The exciting part of the metro area. I always enjoy coming here and enjoying these cultural destinations that is very much part of this region. I also am honored to be here with Mayor Graves and council member and community leaders and people like Isabel, Chanslor, who's done a lot of work over the years together. Am I loud enough, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here to share some thoughts. And what I'm going to do is present a vision of this concept called cultural destinations, because it's happening here. I'm putting it in a context, a bigger context, and how powerful an asset, a tool, a resource it is to build wealth. As you build wealth around cultural corridors, I'll talk a little bit about definitions and terms so that we can get clear a little bit, and then share some thoughts. Now, why am I in this sphere about cultural destinations? It's a very powerful strategy because it's tied to something that we've all been connected with, and that is, in this country, it's racism. In another country, it could be caste, or it could be religion, it could be different things. It's a strategy by a powerful group to have very quick rules of thumb that you can separate people without even saying it, and making this, so the easier it is, the better. So in this country, color has been a way to do that, and that's why I talk about ourselves as Alana, naming the people rather than saying I'm a person of color. I say African, Latino, Asian, Native American, because then it's clear who I'm talking about or what I'm doing. But if you, at the heart of racism is the denial of the value of an individual. And so if you deny someone has value, you can make them a commodity, a thing, something that you can easily manipulate, use, exploit. And so you find that sinking into different parts of society, whether it is the museums, whether every way that this culture is recognized, this culture has been devalued or not invested in. So this model of cultural destination flips that on the head. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Because now when you go into this restaurant or this grocery store in Brooklyn Park or Brooklyn Center, you will see, hey, that's me. And I'm having fun. And I'm enjoying myself. And the owner says, yeah, I love to do this. At the same time, they're all building wealth. So it's a very powerful strategy of economic development rooted in the culture of people. And that's what, I use the word cultural destination because when you use the word cultural district, if you Google cultural district, you'll find a lot of very established kind of what I might call institutional elite culture. So it'll be like a cultural district of big museums, for instance. I'm talking about the neighborhood culture and institution. That's why I use the word cultural destination. Even that word has a broad context, so when you add more language to it, you could say ethnic cultural destination. But I wanted to change that focus because very often the resources are going to cultural districts, but not these cultures. So that's why I'm talking about cultural destination. So having said that, yeah, what are the characteristics of a cultural destination? This is a restaurant in St. Paul, Al-Galgal, by the near the airport. These two entrepreneurs own that restaurant. So in that restaurant, they had an open house where they had artists displaying their products. They helped people taste Ethiopian coffee. And so there was an environment of bringing the community together. So the ingredients of a cultural destination is infused with cultural asset. For me to get experience from Ethiopia was really unique. And then it's building wealth for the owner. And what we would call, this is cultural placemaking. So remember, you have heard the word about creative placemaking. This is not really that, right? It's cultural creative placemaking too. So that's why, as we use these words, we can define what we're talking about. So, yeah. So, what are the benefits of cultural tourism? There are studies that say that people who come looking for cultural experience tend to spend more money. And so this study said nationally they spend 60% more money. It's good for the local economy because in the US as a whole, this is old information, but $171 billion cultural tourism market. And importantly, it puts Minnesota on the map as a place to experience. But my wife recently went to, and some of you may have gone to, I think it was Sisters Celebration, right?
Celebrating Sisters.
Celebrating Sisters, right?
Yes, it was on Saturday.
And she said, one of the things that she kept hearing, though it was not really spoken as clearly, but people kept saying, I came here, I wasn't sure I was going to leave in a year, but I'm here. So why would you be here if you want people to be here, you've got to attract them so that they can find the foods, they can find the entertainment, find the cultures. And Greater MSP, as you were, is trying to do that. I have a tough time keeping my kids here. They want to go out because they're not finding it here, right? So how do we make it a place, but also how can we make Minnesota a global destination? I was talking to Mark Ritchie, who is trying to bring Global Expo to Minnesota. And he says when he talks to the world, they tend to remember Minnesota around the murder of George Floyd. And that's how they define Minnesota. They don't see a lot of also the energy and the vitality that is also in Minnesota, that is in these destinations. And I think we have a good story to tell people that here in Minnesota, that happened. That tragedy happened, but we are also a place where we have flipped the narrative, flipped the experience to build wealth. So, the rest of this slide, is it? Go back. One more? Oh, so, I made these slides for a larger audience, so I just want to quickly go through it, but you can go to the next slide too. Go to the next one. So what I did was I went, part of it also with my wife, we drove down all across Minnesota. And even in a town like Baxter, we went to that Brainerd Lakes area. In that particular area, we can't find any cultural attraction to soothe our appetite and taste. But in the town of Baxter, there was this most beautiful Mexican restaurant with beautiful murals, and it was a great experience and one of the hidden gems. So in all these different cities that we went, we found these places, and we put together a cultural tour that you could drive to these places and see it. But most so, we wanted Minnesota to understand that, and like what you are trying to celebrate here today, and the strategy today, is you're saying that there are more options than just St. Paul and Minneapolis. This is a Minnesota-wide experience, and this is a Minnesota-wide experience that we need to build. So on my website, Cultural Destinations, all these different tours are there, whether it's metro cultural malls where you go to the Somali soups, the Hmong town, the Latino mercados, or the whole range. We've connected it through a tour that you can go. You have a national, you have a tour of museums too, cultural museums all across Minnesota. And then nationally, as we have been going to different places, I start putting it on the map, and then globally, some places are there. But to give people a vision, this is how you could market and celebrate and develop those things. So some of the things that can happen that define a cultural destination is that you'll find festivals like the night market, or recently in St. Louis Park, there was the Thai festival. And when I went to, did you ever go to for that? I used to think the Mekong night market was vibrant, but that was really way up. So there are these festivals, there are community events that can happen in a location. During COVID, we launched Taste the World Tour, where people could go to different restaurants and experience different foods for a flat price, but helping bring visibility to the businesses. One of the businesses I talked to said, you know, I had this demographic before this tour, but after that, my demographics have changed. I've seen new people that I have not known have come to the building. So that's the whole idea about marketing and branding. And then you have like this gentleman out here did on Selby Avenue in St. Paul, an African-American food truck experience that was filled with the street. And one of the new things I was sharing with Mayor was the real estate development that is infused with cultural assets. So this is the Andy Young Center in St. Paul, where you can see Native American art on it. The Brownstone Building in St. Paul, which celebrates the porters, and you have a reading room inside there and sculptures. So you could tell the story in so many different ways. And so what a city, or what people can do as a state, is you create this cultural destination platform, and we offer different kinds of resources. Sometimes a person needs a space, or you need to help people purchase or own a space. Assistance with events, whether it's a night festival, or whether it is a smaller event in a particular establishment. The actual act, the logistics of putting it all together, that takes effort, as you know. The marketing of the event, so you might have a big thing and nobody comes. So how do we get people in? And other kinds of resources that could help, whether it is, this is where you could bring in the artists and the performers and others who can help make this events, make the destination successful. I'm shopping this around, but I haven't got anybody to bite. But it's a bill that is written up there. If we have a leader who has the courage to do so, they can introduce it this session. And the bill idea is, you put in X amount of money, and matching grants, a city could provide small match, these grants that could come to the state, that it could be housed in the export council, export Minnesota, Explore Minnesota, and it could generate these cultural destinations all across Minnesota. The end of the day, Minnesota has to be a place where people will know we celebrate all cultures. So in this collage, there are all the different museums, cultural museums, from the Swedish Institute to the Mille Museum, right? So how can we find and celebrate and connect all these rich cultural assets in Minnesota? So that is where we now move into a panel. And what I just want to encourage you, it's a very critical time in our state history. We have $17 billion budget surplus. My head is a little dented because I've been hitting it against the wall. People are not getting long-term investments, but you live in an area where some powerful politicians hold sway, like the Speaker of the House, and you should get to them to invest in long-term sustainable, not a 2-year, 4-year plan, but long-term investments to build Minnesota. They just announced the budget targets, and I think more money should have been put for economic development because you know what's going to be, if they don't do it right, you know what's going to be their favorite song 2 years and 4 years from now? Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. Yeah. You know that song? Yes. What did the Peronists do? They did everything, but they didn't build wealth. And if you don't build wealth, you are going to be in a bad situation, frustration. So we need that. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. So our panelist this morning is Isabel Chanslor. Isabel is an independent consultant for nonprofits and small businesses, and she'll talk more about herself, but Isabel has a wealth of experience and has been in this work for a long time. And so we welcome Isabel to our panel this morning. Our other panelist is Miss Felicia Perry. She's a business and commercial real estate manager for PIPCLT. And I'll have Felicia talk more about PIP and explain more about herself, but she's another one, phenomenal, doing great work in the Twin Cities here, and I've been knowing her for a while. And last but not least, former mayor of Brooklyn Park, my city, and currently now our Hennepin County Commissioner, Jeffrey Lunde, for District 1, the district we are sitting in. So welcome everyone, and these are our panelists, and I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Corrie.
We'll just have everyone just kind of say a little bit about themselves, and then we'll get into the first question.
So let's welcome everybody, the panelists. I'm glad you're here. You represent a great fountain of knowledge and wealth and insight. And so let's begin first by having a little bit of yourself, and then your favorite cultural destination. Wow. So Isabel, shall we start with you? That you remember it, right? Yes, something that, but
I'm going to start with a cultural destination.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I was just there at the beginning of February. So New Orleans is like a second home to me. And I go every year for my birthday or whenever my sisters are going to show up. And I don't do the main thing that people do when they go to New Orleans. I do New Orleans. You know, I know New Orleans, and I know the culture, and it's everywhere. It's more than just in the French Quarter. But the vibrancy, the history of the African American people there, the history of Africa there, the history of slavery there, all of that combined, you can see it and feel it and hear it everywhere. So it's not just the food, the music, and but it's everywhere, literally everywhere. And it's a black city. Houston is a black city. Philadelphia is a black city. Detroit is a black city. And when I say that, I think we all know what we mean. The highest population and the city governments are led by black people. Still, even though there's such a vibrancy there, still some of the top struggling cities in the United States. Why? Well, it's by design, right? Like Dr. Corrie was saying. So one of my favorite places. And I wish that St. Paul and Minneapolis and the rest of our areas kind of had the love for black people that we should, so that we could like be a place that people would want to come to instead of trying to escape from it all the time, which is what I was doing all winter. I escaped from it. I'm Isabel Chanslor. I'm a mother of 10, a grandmother of 6 so far. My last one just turned 1. And I've lived in this community since 1991. I came in a week after that big, horrible Halloween snowstorm, and I didn't leave. So I'm not a Minnesotan, and I definitely feel like an outsider to this day, because I just don't have that richness of, what you were saying. I've known her since elementary school. That's not my history here. But I have a love for this region. I have spent blood, sweat, and tears raising money for every cause under the sun. And specifically right now, I work only for Black-led, women-owned groups. No hate on men, but you guys are really difficult to work for. So, no, I just appreciate the women that I run into and the work that they're doing, and they're doing their best to build economic systems in their communities. And they're being blocked at every single turn. So part of my job is just to support them, help them find the money, help them write the proposals, help to advocate for them, help to go to the state legislator. Whatever it is, I'm the most useful in how I can be. I got my training through working 10 years at Neighborhood Development Center, which is in St. Paul, and then 7 or 8 years at Northwest Area Foundation as a program officer. Ran my own restaurant, just done a lot of things. And I've been independent since 2019. Before COVID, I started working at home. So I was ahead of the game. But no, so I love this work. I'm all about this work. It's what I breathe, eat, do. And now I have both my daughters working for me full time. So doing this consultancy. So building wealth and helping them advance their skills and be respected, because they were highly disrespected where they were. And so making that jump for them has been like a huge reward for me.
Yes. Greetings, everyone. My name is Felicia Perry. I am the business and commercial real estate manager for an organization called Partnership in Property Commercial Land Trust. Partnership in Property Commercial Land Trust from henceforth will be called PIPCLT or PIP, because it's a lot to say every time I mention it. Let's see, so I've been in this role for the last year. Oh wait, let me go to my favorite cultural destination. So it's hard because first I was thinking, North Minneapolis, because that is a Black cultural destination. And there's so many things I love about it. I love the Flow Northside Arts Crawl. I love Open Streets West Broadway. There's a reason why it's the only self-managed open streets in the city, because nobody does it like Northside, right? But I also really love Philly, as you mentioned, particularly because whenever I visit there, I often think, oh my gosh, like if we could have this sort of investment in North Minneapolis. Or when I go to Houston, and I think literally like, oh my gosh, like they invested this much money into like this development project for Black folks in this neighborhood, and look what was achieved. What if we could have that in North Minneapolis? So I love visiting those places and doing my best to kind of bring home those knowledge and experiences in the work that I do. So I've been at PIPCLT for a year. Prior to that, I was the executive director of the West Broadway Business and Area Coalition, And that's the business association that manages the main, it's a cultural, it's actually a cultural district, a cultural corridor by designation. One of the cultural corridors by designation in North Minneapolis, but it's also like the main commercial or business district in that community. So I worked at that organization for 4 years as an employee and like maybe a year or so as a contractor. Came into that transitioning from about, 7, 8 years full-time entrepreneur. I owned a fashion design company, and I also was a performing artist. So I was I was a professional dancer. So I was touring the world, dancing and teaching like workshops. And then I was also, I had a radio show and like doing all these things. If you're a creative entrepreneur, you know that life of several things kind of coming together. So you might have saw me teaching at a school or performing on a stage. That's how I was paying for my house and raising my 2 children. So, and then prior to that, I had this career a little over a decade in finance. So I was a commercial loan officer. I did a lot of things for a large, they're mid-sized credit union here locally, learned a lot. And so sort of full circle now, I get to work in commercial real estate, doing something a little bit different, challenging commercial loan officers to actually fund Black folks and the BIPOC businesses that I get to serve today. So you'll probably hear a little bit more about it in the questions, but that's just a bit of background. If you'd like to learn more about any of those things, hit me up after this.
Thank you. So I'm going to do the same thing that Felicia did, was my favorite place first. So I have a few, Arbat Street in Moscow, if anybody's been in Moscow. In Kiev, they have another great place. It's almost like Renaissance Festival year round. It's this really cultural, Kiev is over 1,000 years old. So when you say that out loud, you talk about, something's old here. It's really old there. And they have this up the hillside where they have a chapel that survived World War II. Everything else got destroyed, but they have this, it's just this beautiful area. Ginzu shopping district in Tokyo is one of my favorites. I did love when I was in Liberia, Monrovia, and I don't know the street name, I just know we were on it and we walk up and down it, seeing different things. I love the Latino area in Los Angeles. I was born in Los Angeles, and so I grew up, my dad loved food from all these different cultures, so I just grew up with all these different food things that we brought home. And then my favorite place still is always Lisbon, Portugal. I always tell people to go there and everybody ends up going there, which really makes me mad because I haven't been there for many years. So I just love that. My background, I have a master's degree in Russian history. I used to speak Russian, I used to speak Spanish. My first job was in Japan, which I did not speak the language. And but what I believe, and I think Americans, we spend a lot of time focusing on things, is if you leave America and you go around the world, it is all about culture. It is not about all these other things, because when you go to other countries, you understand it's the culture that matters and the people. And what I learned when I lived and worked in Japan was I became fluent at culture in Japanese. I did not speak Japanese, but I understood the rules, how things are done, and that has been a thing I've taken with me forever. It's all these little cultural rules, and what I believe is as much as we're different, we are all the same. Go to any festival, I don't care what the culture is, what the ethnicity, I don't care what the nationality is, they always have a couple things that are the same. 1, food. 2, respect for elders. 3, youngsters performing dances. And it's bigger and smaller, but every culture has those kind of things, and it's just amazing to me that all these cultures around the world, all these different humans around, have so much in similar, and we always spend our time on how we're different, when I'm like, man, this is so cool. This is just like this and that. And so that's my passion. I spent 10 plus years international business, traveling the world. I've done business, not always been to places, but I've done business throughout, you name a place, I've probably done business. And backing up one step further, so I was born in Los Angeles, little town. And my dad was a Navy brat, we ended up moving back to his hometown, which is 1,000 people in the middle of North Dakota, where the only diversity is Catholics and Lutherans. And Lutherans were always like, what are those Catholics doing Saturday nights, right? What is that? And so, but I had pen pals. So I don't know if anybody ever had pen
Yes.
pals. I have the shoebox of this, so for people who are younger, you used to have to send it on the special paper that was lighter weight. And so I have pen pals from all over the world. And so sometimes I think, I didn't know it, but when I was 12 doing pen pals around the world, and then I went international business, and I became mayor of, I think it's first or second most diverse city in Minnesota. For me, it's like those kind of things, I think they flow. So I'm excited, I love this stuff. And I'll just say two last things. Dr. Corrie, I would love to see your bill. Part of my role at the county is to lobby. So I lobby on behalf of the board at the Capitol. I'll be going down there this afternoon. I'll be down there on Friday. I know Lima's down there. And the other last thing I'll say is money follows good ideas. If you say we don't have money to do something, you'll never do anything. I always find that if someone has a really great idea, money flows. It's been my experience, and I know it's like heresy to say that as a politician, but everything. When my office started the anti-hate initiative, everybody thought we were crazy. Our price tag we were trying to get on that anti-hate initiative was $50,000. Then the community got involved. We got $1 million from Hennepin County. It was only because the community was involved. It wasn't my speaking prowess, it wasn't any of that. It was because community contacted their people and said, this is important. And so I fully believe that it's not money that stops us, it's the fact that people lose heart because they think, I can't do this because I don't have money. It's quite the opposite.
Thank you. As you can see, we have a really dynamic panel, and from your experience, you will make a good ambassador for cultural destinations because you said something that's behind what I'm trying to do here, is that while we celebrate our culture as important, you saying, hey, but we all do that. And so you're putting all cultures now at an equal table so that then we can start talking about it, because especially in the legislature, the cultures that I'm talking about have not been invested in. And so all cultures are important. Let's celebrate, let's do things. The second thing that you said was these elements of the culture that are common. I think that's important, that commonality that we talk together. And in your, Felicia, about commercial real estate, well, I had a bill idea which has gone nowhere, but a real estate economic development fund that would encourage commercial real estate and things like that.
Yeah, let's chat, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so there is some opportunity. And then Isabel, your experience with during COVID, and she's always someone I admire, because when everybody was in the house during COVID, she was out in the street connecting people with resources, and so that's great. So we are in the North Metro area, and Acer is doing some great work here. Where would you think we'd start, or where would we building cultural destinations here? So who would like to go first?
So I'm just going to reference the experience that we had together back when the light rail was being discussed on the Green Line in St. Paul area, connecting to the University of Minnesota. So University Avenue in St. Paul, going all the way into downtown, lower town, St. Paul. We worked in different ways on that project. Dr. Corrie was very instrumental in helping us really think about how do we lift up the cultural districts that were there, how do we identify them? So through that process of his knowledge and data and research, we actually have 2 cultural districts that formed. One was the Asian cultural district, which is Little Mekong, near the western areas where kind of the center is, and then it kind of branches up after that. The night market was created, the Asian night market was created from that work, but there's also a business association now supporting those Asian led organizations or businesses. And then the other one is the African cultural district that is there around the Snelling area and University Avenue. So if you don't know the area, but they're plainly there. So my work was one, to work in collaboration with those brewing, at that time, brewing cultural districts, but also support the 400, 500 businesses that were along that line in the St. Paul area. And so what we did first was the important, painstaking task of just trying to find out who's here, who's operating what's being provided, what is culturally specific about every single building. And so we rode bikes, we walked up and down. I was mistaken for a streetwalker several times. That's when I decided to change what I was wearing. And true story. But what we found out were things that, even though we had lived there for so long, and I had a lot of staff that were from the Midway area, they're like, I didn't know this was here. I didn't know this family has been here for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, operating businesses. Some of them own their own buildings. When did this happen? How come we don't know this information? So already on University Avenue, ownership of those commercial properties was a reality. We just didn't know it. And because we didn't know it, we were down on ourselves as a community for a long time. Well, we don't have this, and we don't have that, and we don't own this, and we don't own that. And it wasn't true. So we collected all of that data. We painstakingly went through it. And then we started the work of supporting and highlighting those businesses and the cultures that they come from and represent, and the types of services and products that they provide to the broader community. It was rich. The cultural, the corridor was now called the Central Corridor, and so all the work around the Central Corridor occurred. So part of the money around marketing to support those businesses was developing a book, and it was a beautiful book done by these amazing photographers that were coming down to these businesses that we had identified, taking gorgeous photos of their products, of them, and creating a book. It was a beautiful, we had 2 editions. And this book, we took to the legislatures, we passed out to all the senators and the representatives, we took to all the foundations, we took to all the corporations to raise money and to highlight them and then to welcome them to these businesses. We have some of the, not to, insult anybody, but we have some of the best food in the state of Minnesota on University Avenue. Hands down, the best Thai food. Hands down, some of the best Greek food. And you can go on and on. Ethiopian food. I mean, it's just amazing. But the cultures that come with that, and the things that we weren't seeing were the language, the dance, the culture, the beliefs, the beauty, the clothing. And so creating those cultural districts is important, because those organizations that grew from that do that work, right? So every year there's a big event in the Snelling area. It's an African cultural district, a festival. And it's growing, it's baby, but it's growing. And so these things are really important to start. But I think for me, I would say the biggest thing is to find out who's here and share that information with the community. Show them the proof of what we own, what we have, and then give them the opportunity to decide what they want to do with it.
Just want to capture what you said, the experience of University Avenue and building up these different cultural destinations like Little Africa and Little Mekong, and the support for businesses towards ownership and towards whatever technical assistance.
Yeah, and then sort of repeating your question, sort of where is a starting point, or where do we look as far as creating a cultural district?
Or celebrating it like
celebrating.
Like for someone like me who comes here,
Mm-hmm.
you say this is the place you should go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is where we can create the environment.
Yeah, I think there's many layers to how you could answer that. So let me do my best to kind of stay in the lane of why I'm here. Okay. So in the lane of like commercial property ownership and its importance of creating or maintaining a cultural district, from the perspective of Black folks in America, there have been really intentional, systematic ways in which Black folks have been kept out of ownership of land while we've invested centuries, generations of physical labor, mental, emotional, spiritual labor into literally building the infrastructure of this country. The country's systems have very intentionally for all of this time, even after the Emancipation Proclamation, y'all, believe it or not, have very intentionally legalized that servitude that they had just made illegal, right? And so part of that has been through things like if you've things to look up, and I can get references later, segregation by design. Even here, the Jim Crow North has a lot of great information starting point of the historical context of exactly why I do the work that I do. So what I know to be true and what I've experienced in my 40-some years of life is that if you don't own anything, like you're almost like invisible to the systems and the powers that be. When it comes to allocating resources, it's people who own stuff that they're looking to help, right? Because, I mean, it impacts their tax base. Taxes, money, it's all connected to money in a lot of ways, right? But so because for generations, we've been locked out of owning homes, and most business owners, when they enter into like commercial lending or like get those big businesses where like, wow, they just opened this big old business with a building and all these things like from jump, and I'm sitting here trying to hustle with the 2 pennies rubbed together and buy cleaning supplies from the dollar store to start my cleaning business. And there are people who are able to get like loans and all of that. Well, they're able to get those loans because they're able to leverage generational wealth, like their houses. I don't care what, like if you don't own a house, it is difficult to get into to get commercial loans.
That's right.
Because they're looking for collateral. And if you've been kept out of owning a house or kept out of like getting, these different things, you don't kind of have that collateral, your family doesn't have it, and you can't go to your rich uncle to even get like, that sort of loan, not even like $5,000. It could be a challenge for even your family, your mom, dad, and your uncles to raise $5,000 to kick you off, right? So when you're not having that, and that's a lot of folks' stories, it makes it just difficult to sort of participate. We just don't have access by way of like design. So what PIPCLT is looking to do is try to close that gap. One way we try to do that on the financial side is to provide what we call an affordability investment. So for instance, if you're looking to buy commercial property and you partner with us, we'll come up with 20 to 40% of what that deal is. That's your purchase price, and sometimes we can cover a little bit of like some build out to, like a vanilla shell to get you in there type thing. We additionally, a lot of people get attracted to PIPCLT because that affordability investment. But also there's this piece of like, it's who you know. I cannot tell you enough how valuable it is that I know this gentleman by way of one of his employees that I used to work with over north, right? And then the work that we've been able to do collectively, like even with like some of the blue line stuff, different things, how valuable it's been, like who I know. So that's what is it called? Social capital. So PIPCLT tries to, those partnership in property, like we really try to bring those partnerships into the deal, like our relationships with different lenders, traditional or not, right? Okay, circling back to cultural districts, right? When people own stuff, that's who people see. People don't always think of like North Minneapolis as like this cultural destination. I went to look at your website, I searched a couple of times. I didn't find North Minneapolis or anything about it on there, which is why, I'll probably submit some stuff to you because there's some cool stuff that happens there. But like, we tend not to like really own a lot of that stuff. There is a huge gap in ownership black folks there, commercial ownership as well as home ownership. There are a lot of new programs now, right, to close that gap on home ownership, but there's none that really exists on closing that gap to commercial ownership. So what we risk in North Minneapolis, as an example, on West Broadway, is there is a proposed light rail coming down that corridor. Why is that important culturally? Well, some of our largest cultural events happen literally on that corridor, right? They will be displaced should a train come down. Open Streets West Broadway, that generates a lot of revenue every single year, a lot of revenue every single year for entrepreneurs and business owners, because it attracts outside money in to come and spend up. They soak in all our culture, they come for a day and then they dip out, right? They get their day pass and they dip out. But those are super important. I literally am wondering, where's Open Streets gonna be, right? Flow Northside Arts Crawl, which is a 3-day arts festival where there are I think upwards of 200 artists and about 40 businesses that participate in that. Most of those 40 businesses don't necessarily even own the building that they're in, right? On that corridor, at risk of displacement. People aren't having conversations with the business owners the way that they're having conversations with the property owners and their landlords about how we're gonna take care of you when the train comes and all of that. There's a lot more planning around the property owners than Wolfpack Promotionals, right? Right over there across from the Capri where Freedom Square is. So as a context, the importance of us owning the space in which we occupy is super important in sustaining what that culture is. Now, things that happen to Black people, we kind of lay over as a cultural thing. It's not a cultural thing that Black folks are in poor neighborhoods. That's a systematic thing. I think what you should pay attention to is what comes out of that. Look at the rose that grows out of that concrete. We've got some amazing murals and public art all throughout North Minneapolis. Download the Flow app and you'll see those things. There's maps of different things, right? But while we don't have the most art galleries and stuff, and a lot of people think about juxtaposition arts, but there's Homewood Studios that works with a lot of young folks, and there's other places in which we have to think creatively, right? So it's not gonna appear as just a museum. It might appear as a group of murals in a certain place. You might have to go to Harrison neighborhood to experience certain things, going down Glenwood or something like that. That's a part of the culture. So Black culture is not disjointed in its own, but it pops up where it can. So always look for that. And I haven't even gotten into St. Paul, right? Or even Brooklyn, in the Brooklyns and what's happening here. So just in that context, I think I took up enough time on that one. Sorry.
There's a lot that you've said. As you spoke about ownership and real estate, it was behind an initial idea that we were pushing in the state a couple of years ago called cultural corridors, cultural malls, and Main Street. And the state, in some way, it ended up in the Main Street program where it was to get to, I think the point that you're making is when you create cultural destinations, the ownership model, whether it's a small entrepreneur or a mixed-use development, how could you facilitate it happening? But also from the experience of North Minneapolis, I've been taking pictures about all those murals as I walk around, and would be glad to work with you about a tour. But the ideas that you talked about, if North Metro were to do something, how would you connect the art and the music? The smaller size, innovative, organic kinds of development that happen, to keep that in the radar as we go. So some great meat and potatoes from both of you on how do you build it. Now, Commissioner Lunde.
Well, talk about those investments we need.
Yes.
The money.
It's all about the money, right? A couple things. So I just a little history, a little foreshadowing, right? So I got elected to City Council, Brooklyn Park, right? As the housing foreclosure crisis was happening, 2006, 2007. I'm a door knocker. I'm a community engagement person. I campaign, I'll never outspend anybody, but I will outwork and outknock and outalk. And what I was finding is all these empty homes from foreclosures. And I think we talked about the missing wealth, and I was trying to explain to people, white folk in Brooklyn Park, what was missing. And I said, when you have groups of people that were targeted with balloon payments and certain types of loans, that then when they became due, people didn't have their house anymore. And that missing wealth is now 2022, and that wealth that would have been created over 16 years of paying off a house, using that. My dad started his business by mortgaging a second mortgage on the house. So you use that, or you send kids to school. I want to send them to a better school. I'm going to take out a home equity loan. You use that wealth to then pay it forward. And when the housing crisis, and I know it happened well before then, but to me that was the latest, all this wealth left and people were left without. And that's why Minnesota has some of the worst home ownership rates for people with diverse backgrounds, especially African American, especially Indigenous. And the reason I bring it up is, if you haven't been watching the news, they're worried about another banking crisis. If there's one thing I know about banks, banks always get made whole. And the people who fall victim to it, I told you my dad took out that loan in the farm crisis. We lost our home and our business in a small community, which when there's 1,000 people, there's nowhere to hide when you just got foreclosed on and you're now living with your grandparents. And so that, I'm worried, so I'll foreshadow that if banking continues to have challenges, you know who's gonna get made whole, they always do, and you know who's gonna pay for it, because we always do. And so I think something that we should take lessons from what happened in 2006, 2008, and try to make sure that our policymakers, the people who represent us, and be myself included, remember not to do what we did before, which is make the people who caused the problem, right? The people who got the loans. If I went and applied for a loan and they said, here's a loan for your house, and this is your only option, you sign the paperwork, then you find out 3 years later I got a balloon payment and I'm gonna lose the house. Because Brooklyn Park was the worst hit by foreclosure, so I'm a little jaded because I saw lots of people hurt. I believe that the key is about ownership, and what can we do to get people to own things? I know KB at Wolfpack, he leases, and so he's always at risk if the landowner decides to do something different. We've worked with Denise and Acer when another landowner said, time to go. And so if you don't own, you're always at the mercy of someone else. And so to me, the holy grail is that. I will also tell you that I have looked at some of the home loans that cities offer, and they do the pat myself on the back, look at us. And then you ask them how many they actually issued out. The number usually is this. It's a real simple number to remember, 0. Because the houses in their communities will never have that gap closure. A person who can't afford an affordable home isn't gonna go into Edina and afford $600 a home. I don't know what you've got for a program. And so I think some of that is some realism, and I try not to go, but have you really helped anybody? The answer, of course, is no, but I'm too Minnesotan to just say it direct to them, but it's true. So I think we need to have some realism. Like when people say they have a program, I think the first is, how many people have you helped?
That's right.
And if the answer is not many, then stop it. Put that money into something else.
That's right.
And as
So-
for the demographic data on it,
Yes.
a lot of city programs that are meant to support, and specifically I'm talking about the city of Minneapolis, and because I read their reports. A lot of the city of Minneapolis programs that are meant to somehow support like Black or BIPOC business owners or entrepreneurs or people, a lot of their data shows that overwhelmingly white men are benefiting from them. So the money, the all of those things, overwhelmingly, it's still like a gap between Black folks, Indigenous folks, people who speak other languages actually getting access to those things. So, which is why, again, like I always ask, well, okay, look, tell me the demographic data, because they do pat themselves on the back, and I'm just like, I'm looking around and we're struggling still. So, yeah.
Yeah, when I was Director of Planning and Economic Development at the City of St. Paul, we put all the data for city property up. Anybody could look at it. But because you raised the point about data, but also power, I want to point out to you another resource on I have a different website which focuses on my research called empoweringstrategies.org. And I put up 2 sets of data because can you imagine that in this critical moment in our history, even if a legislator were to go to their website to find out what's the demographic composition of the data, for a while it was old data. And so I raised up, it's no longer there, so you don't have anything, but they're making decisions about spending without good data. So on my website, I have data by legislative district, the Alana population, but also the margin of victory of that candidate in that district. And what I found that there's enough votes there just if people look at that numbers to pass any legislation. But about more than 40% of the districts have House and Senate have the person won with a margin of victory less than the Alana population in their district. In this area, which includes a broader area, including, say, Speaker Hortman, 47%, I believe, are Alana people. Now, the question is, we out there were waiting for all of you to be in leadership before the target came out yesterday. What were you doing? How did you not approach them and say, we got you elected, where is the long-term funding, right? Now it's catch up from the back, so we got to keep it. Anyways, just wanted to tell you that there's resources there. But we've heard something. I think maybe we should hear from people who might have questions to the panelists or insights. If I were to, as I said, I came to do some research around African grocery stores. I saw within that 1 mile radius of all those places where those grocery stores are, they're rich in cultural assets, and that could be a place I would start, and then widening the circle. But
I can help take that
Yeah.
around. So if we have any questions for the panelists, let me know, and I can come by with my microphone. And so yes, ACER did a BIPOC tour last year, October. Dr. Bruce Corrie and Isabel was on that tour. Commissioner Lunde's office was also on that tour as well, where we took them through the cities of Crystal, Brooklyn Center, and Brooklyn Park, where they got to see different cultural destinations that are just naturally happening because, again, our businesses tend to come together and be in one area. So we're gonna take a question right here.
Thanks. Hey, Ricardo Perez, he, him pronouns. You all talked about the systemic design that led to the outcomes that we're operating under currently. So I'm hoping if you could talk about some policies or smart investments that are very specifically targeting that history of racism that's shaping what we have today. So are there any policies or specific investments or strategies that you can talk about that we can get excited or behind to get this going, you know?
I know that there's several, and you have to really look around the country to see who's doing what. California is probably leading edge in a lot of community wealth ownership, commercial things that they're doing. There's a ton of nonprofits, and I can't even think of one name. Push Buffalo in Buffalo, New York, another one that's doing groundbreaking work. Jackson, Mississippi, doing groundbreaking work. Houston, groundbreaking work. And so I think that there's some things like I experienced community benefits, and I know community benefits, people hate them or love them because of how they're controlled, but when the community really controls the process for a community benefits agreement to occur, when a property is being sold that's city controlled, county controlled, state controlled, and the demand in the legislation or in the purchase agreement is that we're only gonna sell this to you, this entity, if there is a community benefit within that project. So Midtown Global Market, which is in the Alina building in Minneapolis, there was a beautiful community benefit requirement, legal requirement. And so the developers, Ryan companies, had to partner with the community, had to get that project. And they built, and their idea around the community benefit was Midtown Global Market. I have that language with me, I'll pass it out to anyone. Powerful, it wasn't legislation, powerful piece of work that was done by the city and the leadership in the community to make sure that Ryan Companies and Alina couldn't just get rich on this building, that the community had to actually have a huge benefit, which is a space now where 40 to 50 entrepreneurs can develop their businesses or stay in forever. So I think that's one thing that people kind of overlook. I would love to see, we do have products that are created by DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, that comes from bills, right? There's legislative bills. We want to encourage, especially after the murder of George Floyd by the police, we want to encourage Black and brown ownership in the community. So we're going to create targeted community capital program, and we're going to create Main Street. Well, they fall short by a lot. In St. Paul, in our East Metro, the Main Street money cannot be used to purchase a property. So you already have to own the property. Well, who's applying for that money? And how are you really touching into the depths of the community to provide those opportunities that would create great wealth, right? You're out of the game if you don't own the property already. It's ridiculous. And I've been part of lending. I was at Neighborhood Development Center for 10 years. I ran the lending TA departments and all of that, constantly pushing for us to do differently. And I would scream at the top of my lungs to staff. And I think this is all middle management and staff in every department under the sun. They act like they raised that money. They act like it came out of their pockets, and they steward it like you're a child. I didn't last long. I lasted long. I went out in a blaze of fire because of the types of internal racism that occurs when someone walks in the door and is asking for a loan for a great idea that they've already shown has legs. And you're turned down, or you're giving them $10,000 to $20,000, just enough to kill you, right? I get really angry about this stuff, and so I'm trying to figure out at the age of 55, I'm spinning in this rat wheel too, and I got to get off, and I got to figure out how. And talking to Felicia this morning, I'm like, I'm on fire. Okay. To figure out how are we going to change this, because we see you, and we see them, and we know what they're up to. And treating us like children is killing us, right? You're limiting our ability. You're predicting our success out of your own experience. You don't know us. You've never seen us. You don't experience us. So you need to get out of the way and quit making the decisions. Yes. Right? Yeah. If that money is put out to community, you need to get out of the way and create a real, true process. And I would love to run one of those. Anybody listening? I'm very experienced. I know how to get money out the door to the people who need it. Right now I have a fund that I took. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, successfully took away from a bunch of white people. And I was in the paper and I was made to look ugly. I didn't care. I did not care. And that money got to the community, got to University Avenue. Dr. Corrie knows about it.
Yes.
You could just look up my name. You'll see the story. But yeah.
To Google you.
Google me.
Policies.
Other than defer
Well,
to
the question around policy, if you had anything to add.
just quickly, on Blue Line, which very well known where I'm pushing on that. We've got, I don't want to say we, Commissioner Fernando and I, so it's a partnership between us. So I'll just keep saying we. Really pushed to have the anti-displacement team set up, because specifically we knew if these policies weren't identified up front, that people would give the lip service at the end and not do anything. That's the first part of the game. The real game is the money to carry out the policies. If you've talked to Anna from my team, you will know we are all about the second stage, which is, I know that there's gonna be good policies come out of the anti-displacement team. We have good people who are gathering to come up with good ideas. That will matter nothing if we don't come up with the cash on the back end to enable all that stuff. So right now we are trying to kind of copy the Central Corridor Funding Collaborative, but we want to try to put money together to carry out what the anti-displacement team does. Because if we don't have the money, it's all just lip service. And so it is, for me, the focus, I'm letting the anti-displacement do their work, is to find the cash. And it's not for Jeff or the county to control it. It's to put a nonprofit, a third-party group that's community-based, to push that money to the people to carry out that policy. That's where my focus is, especially on that. And the last thing I'll say about Blue Line, because I can't help but advocate for it, is I don't trust people with money, because they always do what's in their interest. If I get 2 pieces of metal laid horizontally in the ground, they can't take that away from us. They will take buses from us. They will cut routes. You'll still see on the map a color for a route that they've got going, but it runs half as often. People have to sit outside and have to wait for it. I know if they actually have to invest in us, they can't take those metal out of the ground. They can't screw with us later, and that's one of my drivers. And the last thing, since I'm already just starting to anger off on a Wednesday, is if you notice, and I'll talk about the we, Irene and I are on this, is they're already starting to change the rules. Southwest, the affluent suburbs, we have fought tooth and nail to get that completed. I've taken votes that I hate to put hundreds of millions of dollars to make up for gaps. And I knew it, it's coming. Wow, we're gonna have to change how we do things. They always change the freaking rules, excuse me, I almost swore, before they come to our turf. And they're already started. And the people who represent us have already started making excuses. We need more accountability. Where was that accountability when rich people got their line? Wasn't there, but suddenly they're gonna take out years of not reforming Met Council out on the people who had no power to do anything. And sorry, I'm gonna get mad, so I'll stop there.
Do we have any more questions?
Can I ask a Blue Line question?
Okay, we'll take a question here, and I saw another hand. And one over there.
Since I know,
Sorry, 1 second. And we're supposed to have lunch at 11:30, but I'm gonna let folks do their thing. Go ahead.
since we do put out information for the Blue Line, just to inform the community and the businesses in the community, is it a done deal? Because a lot of people in the community absolutely hate the idea. So are we putting this information out after the fact, or knowing that their voices really don't matter? That's what I
I'll let somebody else go first.
You know, the way that they do engagement is always very interesting. I think that what you're feeling is real. This feeling that, are we just telling people some stuff that's like already been decided, or are we giving them all the information? I think what Met Council is thinking that you're doing is having these deep conversations with people, even though you don't have the full amount, like you don't have the full, you kind of have the information they give you, and your job is to share it and make sure it gets to the people. But what's not happening is that processing and digestion period, and like really holding that space. And so what ends up happening is when they have, there's a meeting happening today. Where is it at? The Blue Line meeting?
Guthrie.
At the Guthrie.
No, Capri.
At the Capri. Okay, yeah. I'm about like, they trying to, some of these meetings I'll be like, who's finna go there?
Not the Guthrie, what?
At the Capri, thank you. So at the Capri Theater, what will probably happen there, I'm gonna try to make this one, because I've been trying to go to the, Ms. Jackson hit me up, I can get it to you. I have a flyer in my email. Good to see you. But so, what I know is not happening are really that space to really process. Even the engagement stuff that they have, it's a limited amount of time. There's no space held for how traumatic it is to see like the building you live in, or one of your favorite businesses be pink, meaning it has to go type thing, and like no proper context, and like your first time seeing it is on this imagery here. And so there's a lot of work trying to be done. What I urge you is to go back to, is Joanne still doing that?
Yes.
Give this very clear feedback to Joanne that this is what it feels like. It matters to Joanne. And you're gonna have to really co-create with them what real engagement looks like. because the way that they do it, it's not gonna work, and we've run out of time, like, we're behind.
I think my
Yeah.
question is more because we do have a real great relationship with Joanne, and she does share a lot of information.
Mhm.
But our job is to get the information to the community and accept their feedback and report that feedback.
Indeed.
So the community is feeling like, why are you even giving us this information when you know it's a done deal? So I think that's the part that I'm.
Transparency and integrity coming from that council.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a trust piece that they're dependent on y'all to fix for them.
Right.
Okay.
And give that feedback to them. Like, you need to give them that feedback. Hey, look, we're doing our job. We appreciate, this contract, and these concerns you have, like that direct feedback. People don't trust right now Met Council. Like, that's what you're experiencing. People know how transportation developments go for neighborhoods like ours. The anti-displacement work group already put out this information that it is happening quicker now with this blue line extension in our neighborhoods, in these neighborhoods, than it did for Central or the Green Line and even Southwest, right? So that urgency and the on us to build that trust, it's gotta be coming from them, and they can't keep trying to lay that burden on y'all.
Can I add
Yeah.
one last thing, and really for the
Indeed.
commissioner, because I think the feedback from the community, I've never heard the Black community speak up as much as they have on the blue line.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the biggest things they talk about is now that we're working to quiet Broadway and Lindale, this coming through that area with all the violence, the drug addictions, that they will jump on that and ride into some other neighborhood. So I mean, a lot of people are nervous about the crime that this is going to be boosting as well. We just need to address all of those things.
So you wanna know what the commissioner is going to do to address that?
Are you hearing those things, or are we prepared? Like, do we have people set up to be on these trains or be at those stops to make sure, because we're right now doing work at the bus stops there. What's the overall plan for the community for that feeding into an already crime problem in that very area and beyond?
Make that a demand versus a question.
Okay, that's a demand,
I'll say this, to your, is it a done
If y'all
deal?
want this to
And
come through.
is that, I don't feel it's ever a done deal. I don't think from a state that the plan is like, we're gonna do this project. I don't ever at any moment feel like we're gonna get the project. And then the second question is, do I ever feel like how it's going to be done, which is different than if it's gonna be done? I don't ever think that is a done deal. At this moment, I'm like, I still believe that we're still gathering input, and when I say input, that's not me talking, that's me listening, right? To find out, what do people want? Where do you want things? Or don't you want things? The Metro Transit safety issues are very real. I think the word I'll use is execution, which is get your damn job done. Because if you can't at Lake Street, can't pick up the trash, then how are you gonna do everything else? That's like the easiest thing to do. If you can't fix a window that's broken for 14 months, I'm not making that up, by the way, that doesn't require all this stuff. So we are actively working with them. The county is, we are. I spent an afternoon with the Streets to Housing team down at Transit Center of Mall of America to see how we do engagement with people whose only non-crime is to be homeless. I said non-crime because you're not a criminal if you're homeless. That is not a crime, that's an opportunity. And so spending our time there to see how we could do things on transit. They're down there right now, they'll do things. So we are trying to figure that out. The transit, the safety issue. Sometimes people use safety as a racism. I don't want those people getting on the train and coming to my neighborhood. I'm like, well, okay, back up. Who are those people? I think I know what you're saying, but please, I'm not smart, just tell me. And so we know that some of the crime concerns are because people are saying those people, which is Minnesota way of saying what we all know, right? So, but I do think that people who ride transit have the expectation they should be treated with dignity. So if a person needs transit to get to their work, by God, can we make it safe? Can we make it feel like this is an investment in them? I think they deserve no less than that either.
It should be.
Okay.
Let me do something real quick and then I'll bring it back to Isabel. We'll have her ask her question, that way you can answer both.
Okay.
Hi, this question might be more for Dr. Corrie, but anybody can answer it. So do you have any examples of government-supported cultural districts around the country?
Yeah.
You know, that are, you know, pretty out there, and if you can share those, that might kind of help us put it to.
To either Felicia or Dr. Corrie or, so, you know, one of the things that I've learned in organizing, because I started as an organizer, is that you can't passively wait for the governmental entities to go your way or keep asking what they're gonna do, because they don't have answers. They know how to plan a transit, line. They don't know how to do the rest of this stuff, and some of them really are not capable even after you give them the information. So you have to demand, you're right, you have to demand, but you have to organize around your demands. You have to push. So in St. Paul, the Central Corridor was planned 20 years before any of us knew about it. 10 years prior, then they made the announcement. They already had 10 years of planning, right? About just the infrastructure, not about how it was going to serve the community. So there was a segment of the community, as you guys know, the Rondo community, that had been devastated, terrorized, flattened out, gone, vanished, that experienced that trauma and said, you can't do this to us again. And then we found out that there were stops, there was going to be 3 stops in the neighborhood that were not going to be there unless the community did something about it. So the community organized and did not work with, they tried to work with Met Council and the state and everybody. But eventually they got their own advocacy, they got their own attorneys, they went to the feds themselves, they advocated, and they got those stops in an elevator. They followed the Commissioner of Transportation to a conference, knew he was gonna be a guest speaker, followed that man, stalked him, until they found the opportunity to get into an elevator with him. And he was like, oh, I haven't heard about you guys yet, but we've sent all our information, but I haven't seen it yet. And I want to see it now, and now let's have a discussion. Here is my phone number. So it takes a lot of work, unfortunately, a lot of work. Our voices are not enough because we don't own, so they don't bother. When it comes to light rail, there are light rail systems across the country and internationally that have community policing. They're paid for. They abandoned us on the Green Line. They didn't want any of those stops, and they decided, well, now it's more expensive than we thought. Now we can't make the investments, so now we're not gonna have any policing. Sorry, we need some type of community policing, and they need to pay for it. So I would encourage you guys to look up and research, make your demands, and organize around them. Show up, put it in the papers, put it on social media. Don't stop. It's the only way. You have to lift up the voices in order to halt their activity, right? And get them to like, ooh, we better respond. Because now the papers are picking this up, NPR is picking this up, like, they're making a lot of noise, and we need to figure out some type of negotiation, right?
I want to say that I remember you during the light rail Green Line, that one of the first people I've heard about talking about community benefits. The image of me is you going around with a sign-up sheet and talking to people. So good work. A lot of things have happened with your advocacy over the years. I just wanted to say one thing. There's a difference between funding an ethnic restaurant and funding a cultural destination, right? So what cities can do is beyond just going to funding it, but how do you make it come alive with these other things? That's when you bring in the artist and you bring in the story. What's the story that you're celebrating? And so in the city of St. Paul, we tried to do that when I was there, by integrating all the city resources towards these destinations. So whether it's planning or zoning or affordable housing, right? How do we connect all those resources? And Isabel probably have some experience nationally because she's been traveling around that you mentioned.
So I know we have this is our last question, and then we're gonna get one closing remark from Dr. Corrie and our panelists. And lunch is here, so please stay and eat and continue to fellowship. You have a question over here?
So with the kind of how Isabel was saying, I want to share that I understand where you're coming from as a community organizer. I literally shut down an office just to speak to our representative, and I had about 15 people shut down this office with me. And I did not leave that office until I got that person on the phone. And it was for like 5 minutes, but then it hit like social media, and then a news outlet found out about it. But it took about 15 people to come and even shut the office down. You have to be strategic about it. But anyway, that's a bigger conversation for another time. I just wanted to mention that there is I wanted to ask what your thoughts are on the surplus of Minnesota. It's about like 19 or 20 million or billion now. Has anyone ever thought about giving people not like reparations, but introducing something where people and families get something in return? Right now, I know they're working on that a little bit. It's like $2,000 per family and $1,000 for a single individual, but they make us jump through hoops to even get any of this. And how can we make it so that, or even start talking about it and introducing that type of bill to see if we could up something like that? Because being a single female, like I get bombarded on, with taxes, insurance, and most of us are going in debt more and more and more. So again, not like reparations, but just kind of stabilizing and bridging that gap of debt to, they always say debt to income ratio, but the debt is so much, like we can't even sustain ourselves sometimes. So what does that look like? And is even that like a possibility? I don't know.
$6 billion of that is due to just Black people. So the surplus is your taxes. And us wanting to get something out of that is not begging for a handout. We're not asking for food stamps. We're not asking for you to continue to invest in the welfare system. Do that, but we're also asking for a real return on that investment. And if it is supplementing people's income, that's what that needs to look like. I mean, she wants to know, is that something we're planning to do? How are folks gonna get a real return on our investment, which is that surplus? Who wants to take a stab at it?
I just very quickly want to say the supplement and in this room that is about building Black wealth, reparations are absolutely due. I think at every turn to Black folks, particularly Black folks who are descendants of our people who were enslaved. It's a real thing. It's necessary. I'm going to elevate that and say that it does belong in this conversation. And then I'll pass it on to folks who are in that policy world to kind of answer about things that exist right now. It is hard. I know in rooms I'm in, when I'm like, say Black people, prioritize Black people, say it's for Black people, make it for Black people only, right? There's always pushback. There's always a reason not to. I'm always looking for a reason to prioritize and just give stuff to Black people, because
saying that,
yeah,
they say it's discriminatory, which is hilarious.
Yeah,
but
I also say things like, well, let's do a reverse racial covenant. I feel like y'all have let's just do what's been done and flip it. But again, they changed that when it comes time to when there's such strong cases across the country and world for reparations, specifically for Black people. All the rules are definitely changing about what's racist and what's discriminatory. So be mindful of that too. But yeah, go ahead. Is there anything? Look at the reparations coming. You can get some out of this blue line or something.
I think to your point, one thing, and I'll just do the total politician thing, which is what has the county done, right? We have started a $10 million guaranteed basic income pilot, and rather than targeting what a specific group, which is I think your question, we're targeting certain people who fit categories, which predominantly in Hennepin County are Indigenous or African American. So rather than call it out and say, we're only gonna fund this group, we actually fund a certain category of need, which is predominantly about 90%. So our guaranteed basic income is not a random lottery. It is actually connected to people who are coming out of the benefits cliff and trying to get a runway going. Where if they just get off of benefits and we're like, okay, now fly, right? They crash, they don't even get off the ground. So we are connecting our guaranteed benefits income with people who are leaving benefits but need time to get some speed going. And so we're connecting those two together. So we haven't said we're targeting specific groups, but what we've done is target certain data points, which we all know historically and percentage-wise are going to do the targeting for us. So that was one example that does this. So if people don't want to talk about specific groups, there's enough data in Minnesota that we don't need to say group to actually try to deliver some good to them. And so that is one thing the county's done. I'm not going to act like we're perfect because we're not. I'm not acting like we don't have long ways to go, but this is something we're piloting. And it's the word pilot's key because in 2024, when all that ARPA money ends up disappearing, you're going to find a lot of governments, and not just the county, cities, state, are all going to be like, oh, we got to raise taxes to fill that. And so your voices are going to be needed because people are going to say, well, that was ARPA money. We don't have any more. And so I think that's where that organizing really needs to be out there.
Give it to Dr. Corrie and we can close out.
Do you want closing remarks?
Thank you very much. One other resources I have on my website, every legislative district, the ethnic economy and the taxes paid, to make that argument that you shared. It's been a great conversation, first with you taking your time out on a Wednesday, right? On a Wednesday morning to come and talk about such an important issue, and for all of you for sharing your wisdom. I've enjoyed this occasion. I encourage you to join us as we kind of keep pushing the leaders to do things like what you are saying. We have a proposal for a $350 million real estate fund that will be targeted to people not mentioned in racial covenants, right? So there could be people, there are strategies and things that could do, but no one's listening. And that's why I've done what I can do. I've given everybody, every legislator has got the facts. I've made the case. Now, if they chose not to do it, then they have to answer to the people, or if the people are silent, then you're silent. But thank you for this area. As I started and I want to end, as such a beautiful talent of resources and wealth building. Let's make it bloom, and I'd be happy to work with you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna be real quick.